Welcome to season 11 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal is to share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you're here and hope it is the highlight of your day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joris Peels, and this is another edition of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright. How you doing, Brent?
Hey, Joris. I'm doing well. Supposedly, the U.S. is in some sort of frigidness right now, and I'm in North Carolina, and it's 19 degrees, which is cold. But I was talking to Katie, and I think she said it was -2 this morning, and so it's cold all over. It seems like.
Okay, well, I hear it's a bit cold as well, but I don't think it's as cold as I've been seeing in the news and stuff. I hope you guys all stay safe and it doesn't end up being super crazy weather eventy stuff again.
All right, so I did have another question because my son, actually, he's a senior this year. He wants to go to Spain, and so I said, I know somebody that's in Spain, and so I don't know when we're going to try to make it happen, but you're in Valencia, right? And is that close to the water?
Yeah, kind of 5 kilometers. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll have to get up with you on that. How would you get to Valencia if you were coming? Would you go Barcelona or Madrid?
Either one will do. Whatever you want to stop over. So no problem.
And I heard the food's good.
Food is amazing, dude. You're always welcome, dude. I don't think my apartment's not big enough for your whole family, but
okay.
but you can definitely we'll figure something out. Out. So who is our long-suffering guest today?
Well, I'm super excited to introduce Diana Hall from ActivArmor. I've actually followed her work for quite a while. She started with 3D printing casts and braces and such. I actually had a patient who had a broken foot go out to one of her facilities. I believe it was in Colorado. They actually flew out to get that because the patient was going to be going to the beach and didn't want to be in a regular cast. And so I said, hey, this is something that you guys should look at. And they did, and they enjoyed their time immensely in the water. So I'm excited to hear her journey, where they're at, where they're moving forward, and just how they're also incorporating not only some computational design, maybe some AI, so maybe we go down that road, but also additive manufacturing as the main product. Super excited to hear about that.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool, Dan. So Dan, tell us, how did you first get involved with prosthetics and orthotics?
Well, I'm a chemical engineer. I went to Colorado School of Mines, and after working in software engineering for many years, I was running a mentoring program for children in poverty. And the kids would have domestic violence, substandard living conditions, and they'd often have casts or immobilizers, bracing, that would stop their basic lifestyle functions and their basic hygiene. They wouldn't even be able to wash their hands to have a snack. So kids just being kids, they want to get dirty, they need to wash, and it would trap moisture and bacteria against the skin. There was one little boy that ended up with permanent scarring on his arm from wearing a wet, soggy cast for too long. So one little girl had bed bugs under her. So it just seemed like it was ripe for disruption. So I started 3D printing out of ABS plastic, any sort of biocompatible plastics, immobilizers that were custom designed and fitted for every single patient to replace traditional casts for fracture care. And that was 10 years ago. So now we're an nationwide and international company. We work with, the top orthopedic surgeons and hospitals in the country and in 15 other countries.
That's super cool. And where did specifically the idea of ActivArmor come from? Is it really where you were just working on this? Okay, you saw this need for this kids, and you were like, I'm going to engineer a solution. That's it.
Yeah, so I literally I didn't have scanning or any capability back then, but it went from concept to finished product within a couple of days because the kids were suffering with these wet, soggy, dirty casts on. And so I would simply measure their little arm with calipers and try to make a digital model of their arm before we had 3D scanning. And then I just made a little patterned cast that would allow for breathability, but also immobilize well, and printed it out of plastic. And I said to the kids, take this to your doctor and ask them if you can wear this instead. And the doctors just started calling me saying, hey, can you make some more of these for us? And I called the FDA and I said, hey, I'm just a person. I'm not Don Joy or something. Can I do this? And This was way back when they were still developing the test protocols for 3D printed wearables. And so they referred me over to Dr. Lex Schultheis at the University of Maryland's Robert Fischel Medical Device Institute. And I worked with him directly to help develop the test protocols for the FDA test protocols that they were working on. And I published research abstracts in collaboration with them and still continue to this day.
Well, that's really cool. And so and I love how proactive the FDA has been in engaging with the 3D printing community and engaging in this inventing community, not just being like, no, wait, or they really have been like super proactive. I think this is just another sign of that. So imagine I have a 3D printed invention and I have it at home. I'm an orthotist, prosthetist, whatever. What advice can you generally give me if I'm going to actually try and get this to market as an official kind of class 2 medical device or something like that? What kind of things should I be doing?
So you definitely want to make sure that you have the regulatory environment, that you're comfortable with that. What your classification should be, and make sure that you have everything ISO certified for biocompatibility, and just make sure that you are following all of the rules to make sure that your products are safe and effective. And then I would make sure that you get the right people behind you. So, for example, Dr. Lex Schultheis and a lot of physicians, I would make sure that you run through all of the clinical scenarios, the tests, making sure that it functions in a way that would be at least as good as the traditional casting methods for fracture care and immobilization, but ideally better. And so that's what we're doing. And then just get the research done. Just make sure that you do enough studies that everyone is comfortable with the outcomes before you try to bring it to market.
That seems sound advice. And on side of that, like if I'm looking at printing stuff, how do I document this stuff so I know that I'm, like, for example, like we all know that if the file's a little bit different, the slicing is a little bit different, how do I document my device? Like, what am I actually supposed to be doing in order to make sure that it comes out like it's supposed to come out? And later on, I can explain it to a regulator or a partner or a hospital, that kind of thing.
Right. So here at ActivArmor, we do all that for you. So we standardize the design. That's what we are. We're a software company, right? At the end of the day, we make sure that every single custom design is standardized to the point of strength, durability, breathability, accessibility, all of the mechanical properties and physical properties that are required while still being custom. And so we're really talking about a mass customization scenario, which is kind of a difficult thing to explain to orthotics and prosthetics, right? That entire market, because you still want to maintain the customization of it, but also make sure that it's standardized enough that you can produce these at scale and at volume so that you can compete with, traditional casting.
Oh, that's really cool. And did you yourself have any problems with your device? Like, for example, testing it and stuff like that? Was that difficult? Was that expensive? Because that's what I think a lot of people...
Yeah, it's expensive. And there's so much to do, right? You got the mechanical test, you've got the chemical, what is the chemical composition of it? And does it change through the 3D printing process, right? So you're going to do mass spectroscopy and you're going to check it before and after the 3D printing. And you wouldn't think that the properties would change by just melting the plastic from one shape into another, but they actually do. So you want to make sure that you maintain biocompatibility through that the raw materials are ISO certified, and then the final products are ISO certified, and then the entire process is standardized enough that you can be sure that you don't have to test every single device coming out, that they're going to be consistent. And so that entire standardization process is another reason that AI is, and I know you brought this up earlier, AI is so important and interesting and potentially valuable, because you don't have to do all of the iterative changes to every single design over and over again. The software can do it for you.
So your journey, I mean, it sounds like you went straight to 3D printing right off the bat. You didn't do like any warm and form stuff. You went straight into 3D printing using your mechanical design abilities, some calipers, that sort of thing. Can you just take our listeners a little bit through that journey? I mean, you don't have to get into like specific materials and that sort of thing, but like, what was your iterative process and what were you thinking about looking at when you were going through that?
Yeah, we've tried all kinds of stuff, low temperature thermoplastics that you can form. And At the end of the day, you want to have the most customization of design with the least amount of work by the end user, where they can screw up, and not have it be consistent, but also to make it so that it is a turnkey system at the point of care. So we originally started the company where we had centralized manufacturing, but we knew that that wasn't scalable. It wasn't a long-term solution at all. It was very short-term because we were just trying to figure out the product and the process and run all the tests and do the clinical trials and make sure that we had everything in place. But at the end of the day, our goal was to have it be a point-of-care fabrication system that could be turnkey enough and plug and play that any orthopedic surgeon's office, their casting techs or anyone could just fabricate these in the same amount or less time, labor time that it takes to do a traditional cast. And ideally, at the end of the day, it will be printing time too. We'll be down to the 20 minutes or the length of time for a traditional cast. We're not there yet, but that's just a matter of time. It'll be like, the goal is to be like Star Trek, where you have like a microwave type machine, just, boop, boop, and then here it comes out, right? Instantly. That would be the ideal scenario. And that's where we're headed with it, to make it just a turnkey process.
But generally, I would actually typically advise clients to not do that because it also adds a lot of complexity. Did they store the filament well? Are they operating it correctly? Did they do some weird software update? Are they using a different, you know what I mean? So locking that down.
We took all of that out. That's the point, is it's turnkey. We hand them, train them on everything. So as far as the material, they have to use the same kind of biocompatible ISO certified material. They keep it in a Ziploc bag with desiccant that we provide. They use our material that we give them, and we show them how to load the printers. We have chosen printers for the system that are plug and play. And we go over there, we set them up, we show them how to use it. It's very simple. And then it's just like running a 2D printer where you just load the cartridge for the ink. They don't know anything about slicing. They don't even know that exists. They don't know anything about positioning on the bed, whatever. Our software does all of that for them. They simply do a 3D scan on their iPhone. They select a couple of options for the design, upload that to us on their little iPhone app. It's a piece of cake. And then within the hour, they have a 3D printable file. It's just G code that they simply download onto a thumb drive, plug it in, and press start. That is it. And they are doing it. Ortho techs, casting techs right there in the orthopedic surgeon's office are doing it with less than a day of training. And they're running it and treating, hundreds of patients at each clinic.
And that's really cool. And what is the advantage of this thing? Where is it? Where are you seeing this getting used? Why do people come to ActivArmor for devices? And what do they use them for?
Pretty much anyone, but so we started out with pro athletes, right? So the NFL, the athletes really see the benefits of a waterproof, breathable option when you're immobilized because, they're going to sweat in it. They're going to want to ice bath with it. They need it to be low profile so that they can perform as much of their activities as they possibly can. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like an ulnar radial gutter cast that someone's wearing, which, immobilizes their fingers as well as their wrist. But when you do it with traditional casting, it's basically a club on your hand. You're not functional at all. With this one, you can choose exactly which joints you want to immobilize and where in a low profile way so that you're not just, blocking your entire hand. You're only blocking the parts that need to be immobilized for healing. And then the rest of it, you have the freedom of movement and access, and that helps you, have more movement that's necessary for you to do your basic lifestyle activities. And it's not just for athletes, pediatrics, it's huge. You can imagine, little kids trying to keep a cast clean and dry for 6 weeks while they're healing. It's ridiculous. It's not even reasonable for a doctor to say, here's a cast, don't wash your hands for 8 weeks. Like that's not even, I don't know if that's 1800s, type of thinking, but it's not reasonable and it shouldn't be. And there's no reason for it to be, especially when, these are covered by insurance, they're affordable, and we're able to do it.
And if we're looking at patients, are they happy about that shower ability? Is it true that it's less itchy? Well, what's the thing that really makes them happy?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can practice basic hygiene. I mean, everyone wants to do that, right? If you're a swimmer or you're in sports, obviously, but even if you are a mom who has to change your baby's diaper, or you just want to do the dishes, or you need to do the gardening, or you want to go to the swimming pool, or you need to take a shower, or let's say that you are in food handling services, or you're in a nurse or a doctor, or you're in a dirty job or career, you're out of work when you have to have a cast on. So workers' comp loves us, right? Because we're getting their folks back to work while they're healing.
That's funny. That's a really good point on the workers' comp. So you mentioned a little bit about, so you started off with the calipers and designing that way, and then you touched just briefly on the scanning. Can you tell us a little bit of the journey on the shape capture side of things? It's more complex, right, than just, I mean, when I say complex, there's to get good data out, you got to get good data in, and that can be software scanning, that sort of thing. I'd just love to hear your perspective and journey on that.
Yeah, sure. When the iPhones, well, we started out with $10,000 handheld scanners, that were very precise and all of that. And the key to getting good data out is the patient being positioned correctly for immobilization, right? So you want them positioned correctly so that you're not modifying their image before you fit them. So positioning the patient and making them hold still for 30 seconds to a minute while you get the scan, which doesn't seem like a lot for adults or whatever. But when you got little kids, if they move, that movement is going to be captured by the scanner. So you want to be able to position them and have them hold for the scan. But then performing the scan is not even a big deal with the iPhone now, right? Because you've got the true depth camera, the 3D true depth cameras. And even if you don't like looking at the front facing screen while you're performing the scan, you can pop the little mirror on, and then you can just look at the screen and walk around the patient, right? So it's not rocket science by any means now, and it's very user friendly. Our app has tactile feedback responses. So it vibrates if you're too far away or too close, and it'll paint the limb white so that you can see the area that you have covered, or it'll make it into full color, right? At the end of the day, there are multiple apps, underlying SDK that you can use. You can either have it where it paints the limb so you can see easily what area you've got coverage in, and where you might have any gaps, or you can have it turn to full color immediately. But regardless, it's always color. That way you can draw right onto the patient where you want the cut lines of the device to be. If you want any exposure for, a bone stimulator or an incision or a surgical hardware like a plate or pins, or if you want an offset, so that you can offset any certain area for like offloading walking boots for diabetics, or just an area that you want a channel built into the inside of the cast so that it doesn't bump onto any sort of a laceration or anything like that. So all of that customization is able to be done when you can, draw with a washable marker on patients and mark up the limbs, and then do a full color scan, in less than a minute.
And where do you see the future of the scanning going? I mean, scanning is like, it's really iffy world. There's always new scanners coming out, cheaper ones. Are you really be like, we've got it all on the iPhone, kind of we're hoping the iPhone will come through for us? Or do you see a lot of like inexpensive scanning apps coming out that could help you? Or do you think maybe at one point we'll have like a $200 scanner that could really do a better job? Or what is your view on the future there?
The scanning is totally fine now. I mean, I don't know, like the cheap apps totally work great, and ours works great. And the cool thing is that every doctor has it in their pocket. Every casting tech, everybody, you just pull it out, and it's a free app for them to use through ActivArmor. We have them do 10 scans so they get comfortable with the process of it, and they're using it now. It's not a barrier to entry at this point. So yeah, and I do see it getting better and easier and faster. I mean, that's always ideal in the entire process. But shoot, from where we came from, I mean, yeah, the first time I did it, I didn't even know about 3D scanning, but this was 10 years ago, and then they were very expensive, and it took a lot of training to, make sure you get a good scan. But now, I mean, it's an iPhone app. I whip them out in 10 seconds, a wrist scan, and it's just it's easy and it's convenient and it's cheap, and I see it only getting easier. I don't like having a separate device personally. I don't like having any sort of requirement that you have to have sort of a snap-on tool or a special scanner or whatever. I like having it on iPhone. Then any doctor anywhere in the country can just pull it out of their pocket, download the app for free, and do a scan and place an order.
What, with the 3D printing and things of that nature, I know most people say that healthcare is kind of ripe for innovation in that because it's patient specific, customization, that sort of thing. But I would say, like, on your entrepreneurial journey, what has it been like to try talking people into some of the technology and such? And what has caused you to be more successful? Like, what is that tipping point for people to really adopt the technology?
Yeah, especially in an old school market like healthcare. I mean, healthcare is very risk averse, for a good reason. But you've got, with traditional casting, for example, in that kind of a market, you've got people who have done the exact same thing for 200 years. And now you're trying to say, hey, this is an analog process. You usually, grab some fiberglass out of your drawer and wet it and smack it on the patient and then saw it off, right? Which seems archaic, but that's what they've done for 200 years. So that's what they want to, that's what they're used to. And so when you try to bring in a new technology into a space like that, you can't bring in technology for technology's sake. Like, there has to be a very strong reason and motivator for them to change. And then you have to find the right people to bring it in. You have to find those innovators, those early adopters, the, sports medicine doctors, the athletic trainers, the folks that really see the benefits to the patient and are willing to implement it into their clinical flow process so that companies like mine can standardize the process and the product and the equipment and the procedures and everything to make it turnkey enough that even the general mainstream orthopedic surgeon can use it. And it's not entirely there where it can become the standard of care yet. I would love to see this get faster and easier to that point. But for right now, I mean, you're talking about a $23 billion industry right now as it stands. So even coming in and taking 10%, and, the clinics that we are working in that have adopted this are using, ActivArmor for far more than 10% of their casting. They're using it for the vast majority and they prefer it. And if you speak to the doctors who have implemented it, they're like, yeah, this is the only thing I use on my patients, unless it's like, a displaced fracture that needs to be reduced into a cast first, and then I'll move them into this later. So it's gaining traction, and it will become, as the tech improves, as the speed improves, as the ease of use improves, it will become the standard of care, but not just because of that, but because patients are demanding it, right? I mean, nobody is accepting the old school casting anymore as, oh, this is the best that we can do and the best that the patient can do. I mean, if you have ever had a cast before and you've had to hold your arm or your leg outside the shower for 8 weeks in a bag and it smells and it itches and all those kind of things, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And especially when something like this is covered by insurance and it can be fabricated on site in a couple of hours. I mean, when you ask, we have found with our clinics that when they ask patients, hey, do you want this traditional cast? And then you have to come and have it sawed off and reapplied and pay for it every exam and x-ray, or you can, come back in a couple of hours and get a 3D printed cast, and then you can swim, bathe, shower like normal. And it's reusable. It's adjustable for changes in swelling or atrophy. And we'll pop it on and off, if you need for exam and x-rays, but it's radiolucent, and, you can practice your normal lifestyle activities and sweat and whatever. 93% will choose it regardless of even if they have to pay out of pocket for it. It's a patient-driven product, but again, the end customer is not the patient for us. Our end customer is our providers. And so if they will not prescribe it, that's why you see some 3D printing companies and tech companies, they're making super thin spider webby, like, oh, this is a cool cast, but no doctors are prescribing it. It's because they don't know who their customer is. Like, at the end of the day, a doctor wants a cast to be protective and immobilizing and strong and all of those things on a patient. And they want it tested and proven that it is going to force patient compliance, that they're not going to be taking it on and off, that it is going to be protective if they're out there on the NFL football team, field, or if they're doing their normal, like, let's say they slip on the ice again. You want them to be protected. It's about what the providers want and giving them what they want and making sure that it's as easy as possible for them to replace what they've been doing for the last 200 years.
So, like, especially with that journey on the 3D printing, what would you say is like some of the funniest requests that you've gotten? Like, it's just kind of almost like left field. Like, are you serious? Are you trying to get me to do that? Or like, or maybe even a misrepresentation of the technology or what could be done. Could you, like, yours and I always get a good chuckle on just like 3D printing. I mean, it is magic, but it's not necessarily the magic box. But I just love to hear, because I'm sure you have plenty of stories on that. I'd love to hear like what your thoughts are.
Well, that's the thing too. And, some of them are kind of, sad because you'll get a scan and you don't even know what it is, and we'll say, gosh, I don't know what this is. And then you'll have to call them and figure it out because you're trying to figure out what they want you to do with that. And I'm sure you get that in prosthetics a lot too. And you're like, how can we help this person? We're not even sure what this is. So, and that's the cool thing about humans, right? I love it. I think that, having it be customized, and everything should be customized in medicine. I mean, I grew up in Children's Hospital because my brother had cystic fibrosis, and I saw little kids with all kinds of different limb shapes and sizes and deformities and injuries and conditions and all that, having to adapt to the devices instead of the other way around. So I love this journey that I'm on and this mission that I get to do because you get to see those. But anyway, two funny stories but that's the cool thing about 3D printing, right? Is you can make it work for anyone. Whatever they have, it's customized for them because there's not a one size fits all, patient. It just doesn't work like that. But there was one where, every time my CAD designers call me and giggle on the phone, I know it's going to be something. And so they called me one time and they're like, hey, Diana. And I'm like, what? And they're like, we got a butt. And I'm like, you got a butt? And they're like, yeah, we got a butt. And I'm like, okay. So called the doctor and I'm like, hey, buddy, what's going on? And he's like, hey, oh yeah, I wanted to ask you if you could make me a mountain biking seat. And I said, okay, so first of all, we don't do that. But second of all, you got to let me know if you're going to send some body part that's not, my guys were like, we don't even know what to do with this. Did he need a butt cast or, whatever. And so the guys are always laughing about who knows what limb, we're going to get. And then there was another one where we got a wrist and the middle finger was up. It was just a flip off finger. Right. And so they thought that somebody was messing with me. They're like, Diane, I think this one's for you, and I'm like, hey. So I called the clinic and I said, hey, are you guys just messing with us or what? And they're like, no, we actually have a Division I football player who he's a quarterback and his middle finger metacarpal, just the MP is broken and he doesn't want any other fingers immobilized. And the doctor said that was okay. So we made him it was just a hand-based cast that just immobilized the MP joint, the bottom knuckle of the middle finger. And that's it, nothing else. And so stuff like that is really cool that you would not be able to do with a traditional cast. You'd block your whole hand and you wouldn't even be able to play. So the fact that these guys are being able to play, but anyway, the doctor was also saying that he would like me to print the hand model with it and send that to him. And he ended up taking that hand model with the flip off on it and putting it on people's desks, whoever he was angry at the moment. So that I know that hand model goes around that office quite a bit, whoever's on the bad list. So, but yeah, we do get a lot of, you know how it is, body parts in different positions and things like that. And it's always interesting to see what comes through. I mean, one day we'll get an infant that's, just a tiny little pink cast that, can fit on your finger. And then, the next one will get like a giant NFL player. It doesn't even look like a human arm. I mean, my daughter is 20 and she put an NFL player's arm cast on her thigh, and just was, put it up like that. And then you'll get some some very big, diabetic patients and, they'll need a full leg cast. And we're talking about, multiple pieces that we're printing it in. And it's just a giant one. And then all the way down to a tiny little baby ankle. So super fun to be able to do. And then, you're looking at other cool stuff like, spinal bracing for infant scoliosis, or little hip spica casts that allow the kids to be able to, swim and shower while they're in these casts for, serial casting for even a year at that age, and changing the parents being able to change diapers and give them a bath and things like that when they have a hip spica cast on. So really cool stuff that we get to do every single day.
So I think the other thing that strikes me, like as you talked through some of this stuff, like how important the communication is on the end product. So just to give you for example, so literally we had a box show up at our office, and the only way that we knew where it was from was we read the UPS label, and it was full of test sockets and all this stuff. Literally no work. We had no idea that it was coming or whatever, but because we saw the address, you pick up the phone and you call. And obviously that's not the most efficient way to go about it. But it sounds like, even from your perspective, like picking up the phone, communicating with your stakeholders is a really important part of the customer service and ensuring the outcomes that you want. I'd love to just hear your perspective on the importance of that, because like everybody says, I just want a one-stop shop, and if you go through my portal, you'll get a device back. But if you don't really have the full picture, it's hard, even though we want the full picture.
Right. And we are not a prototyping shop. We don't do anything other than fracture immobilization and, basically immobilizers that would be in replacement of a cast or a splint. That's all we do. And we only do certain designs, right? And we have them standardized while being custom, right? So that we are popping these out like popcorn. We're not reinventing the wheel ever. Our design software is millions of lines of code, but you can have any long arm cast, for example. It'll fit you with the standardized design that's printable and mechanically sound, and will work as tested and proven in the clinical scenario. So, for us, how we do it is by making sure that we are laser targeted on what our area of expertise is, what's our target market, what are we out there to accomplish, and what do we specialize in, and what's our competitive advantage. And we don't deviate from that, because then you get into this space of, well, this is something new and unique, and it's going to take a lot of time and labor and all that, and we're going to have to retest it and all that kind of stuff. We don't do that. We are awesome and at what we do, but we stay in our lane. We stay in our lane of what we know and do better than anyone else. And that's how we can accomplish it and move forward in a efficient and effective way, which really is mass customization in the truest sense of the word, right? Because if you're always prototyping, there's going to be a lot more communication needs and all that kind of stuff. Although communication is still important, right? Because patients are used to what they've had for the last 200 years, and the doctor's used to that. So you got to make sure, like, if you look at our casts, because they're so organically shaped, some people have thought that they're squishy. They're not. They're rigid plastic. They're Legos on your arm. It's, or your leg. And it is, it's an immobilizer. It's hard plastic. So it's still comfortable because it's custom fitted to you. So you can't force against it, which would make it uncomfortable. But that managing expectations for that. I've had one patient where she said, I don't, and she was elderly person. She said, I don't like the cast because it's hard. And I said, well, when you went in to get the scan, and did they show you what it was going to be, and you felt it? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, was it hard plastic? And she said, yeah. And she said, but it looks squishy. And I said, okay, well, that's the thing, is you gotta and I also said, does your doctor want you to be wearing something squishy? No. Well, okay. Well, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things where you're like, you got to manage expectations with the patient too. And the providers at the end of the day, like, here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do. So, I've had one provider where he goes, well, I just want the hand immobilized, but then I want a big hole all the way around the wrist, and then I want the forearm immobilized. And I said, well, what's going to be in between those two to hold it? Nothing. And I said, well, you're not going to be immobilizing anything then, because if there's nothing on the wrist, no, I thought we could make it as custom as we want. And I said, no, you can. I can give you a little hand loop and I can give you a forearm loop, but you're not doing anything with it. It's not going to immobilize anything. And so in that way, we don't allow them to do stuff that they can't physically print or that won't be structurally sound. So let's say they want like a huge hole for an incision, and then because of that, you can't have the clamshell shape, so you can't get it around your arm to put it on and off, something like that. So we have the parameters set in place so that they can't, do something that's not printable or not structurally sound. And that's there are going to be limitations with 3D printing and the technology as it is, and support. Like nobody wants a whole bunch of supports in it. So we design everything on purpose with the shaping that will allow you to print it with minimal to zero support always. And in an FDM environment. Now, you can print with the HP printers, or, you can do powder bed, or you can do resins, you can do all that kind of stuff. But we chose ours because, it's turnkey, it's easy. You're not going to be introducing toxins and them messing around with liquids. And we want this to be like anybody with a high school diploma or less can, learn how to run this thing and not mess up and not know anything about slicing or that even exists, or even the design. They don't know squat about how this stuff is designed. In fact, a lot of our users, they don't even understand there is a design step. They're like, oh, I do a scan and then something comes out, right?
Right.
To them, it's a closed, black box thing. And that's the magic of it, right? Is they don't need to know any of that, and they don't want to know any of that. And so if we can keep that as closed as possible and just let it be a magical turnkey process, that's the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to end on this. We have a lot of listeners that listen to the show, the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast, that are not clinicians, but they're engineers, and they want to make a difference in the field of orthotics and prosthetics, or in the healthcare field. I mean, you've been around for a little while in the healthcare field. What would you tell those people that want to make a difference and want to have a avenue, but they don't necessarily want to be a doctor or a prosthetist or orthotist, but they want to use their skills, their mind in ways that you have? What would be a direction or some encouragement that you would give to them to be involved in the healthcare field?
I would say if you can pick a product that's not a medical device, do that. Because just the regulatory environment, the liability side, the insurance, the oversight, all of that stuff is incredibly painful. As an engineer in chemical engineering, I had no idea what I was getting into at that point. And now that I see everything that it takes, like, shoot, I could have been, profitable and successful with the product outside of the healthcare space, outside the regulated medical device space within a year, right? But I'm over here 10 years in, and we're good. We're scaling, we're doing well now, but it was a very expensive and painful. I mean, if you don't want to raise millions of dollars and, by investors and dealing with all of that and the regulatory requirements and paying, for medical device liability insurance and all of the clinical trials and all that kind of stuff, if you don't want to do that, I would try to keep it outside of the medical device space. Like if you can pick sports protective gear or any sort of, and if you can sell direct to consumer, I mean, by all means, that is the ideal way to go. Because for me, with fracture care, I'm selling to doctors and hospitals, and that's a much harder sell. You can't just go on TikTok and have a cool video and everybody wants to buy it. Try, if you want to do it faster and easier, I would say find a commercial product and then you can get on Shark Tank and if you want, and or just sell direct to consumer and have people buy it because they want to buy it, not because they happen to be at the very first couple of days of a fresh fracture and you're selling to the providers and stuff. That's a painful and long way to go. I don't recommend that. But if you are going to go down that pathway, get a group of advisors on board who know what they're doing. Get orthopedic surgeons, get medical device manufacturers in the tech space who have done it before, and get them all on your advisory board, and make sure that you listen to them and have people who know what they're doing and just follow their advice. Because don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to start from scratch. You will waste years and millions of dollars. Trust me.
Well, thank you so much for that, Diana. Thank you for that sound advice, and we love what you guys are doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show today and explaining your thoughts and views and your startup. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Brent, thanks of course as always for you being here.
Well, yeah, and I think that's great. I mean, I think it's a great balance, Diana, with what you have, like some of the really positive stories, but this has not been an overnight success, right? So you're 10 years into this, literally millions of dollars, it sounds like, and we're starting to take off. And so I think like that is really the reality of this in the medical space. And I think it was a good balance of that information. So thank you for that.
Anytime.
And thank you for listening to another edition of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. Have a great day.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please kindly leave us a review. That would mean the world to us. If you want to catch up with us, please join us on LinkedIn and give us a shout out via direct message. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode.